Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I thought my secluded cabin was my sanctuary. Then came the letter. The HOA demanded I join their association and hand over my home as a community guest house. I refused. That's when the war began. Trespassing, forged documents, blackmail. They thought I'd break. They made a huge mistake. I never thought I'd have to fight for what was already mine. For the past 10 years, my cabin in the Colorado wilderness had been my escape, a place where I could get away from the noise, the traffic, the constant demands of modern life. I bought the land outright, built the deck with my own hands, and spent countless weekends fishing in the nearby stream, hiking through the woods, and sitting by the fire with a cold beer. It was perfect until the HOA arrived. A few miles away, a brand new housing development had sprung up, complete with cookie-cutter homes, strict regulations, and of course, a power-hungry HOA, Sierra Pines Homeowners Association. I had nothing to do with them. My cabin wasn't within their development, I didn't use their roads, and I sure as hell hadn't signed any agreement with them. But that didn't stop them from coming after me. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a letter taped to my front door. The envelope was thick, the HOA's logo stamped in the corner. I opened it, already feeling annoyed, and skimmed the contents. Dear Mr. Rivers, it has come to our attention that your property is now included in the expanded jurisdiction of Sierra Pines HOA. To maintain consistency and harmony within our community, we invite you to formally join our association and contribute to its upkeep. Furthermore, your existing structure is ideally suited to function as a community guest house, a shared amenity that will benefit all residents. Please contact our office to discuss membership fees and compliance guidelines. Sincerely, Karen Holloway, HOA President. I read the letter twice, then again, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. A community guest house, membership fees. They had to be joking. My property had never been part of their HOA. It had been built long before their development even existed. There were no shared roads, no common utilities, no reason for them to have any say over my land. I crumpled the letter in my fist and threw it into the fire pit. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I pulled into my driveway and immediately knew something was off. Two men in matching polo shirts and khakis were wandering around my property, jotting things down on clipboards. One of them was even taking photos of my cabin. I stepped out of my truck, my gut twisting with anger. Can I help you? One of them, a tall guy with slicked back hair and an air of self-importance, gave me a wide, rehearsed smile. Oh, Mr. Rivers, perfect timing. I'm Jeff, part of the HOA evaluation team, just conducting an initial assessment of your cabin. Assessment, I repeated. For what? Jeff flipped through his clipboard like he was about to give me a property tour. Your integration into the Sierra Pines community, of course. Your cabin is in a prime location, and the HOA is reviewing potential modifications to bring it up to community standards. I stared at him, barely processing what I was hearing. I'm not part of your damn HOA. Actually, Jeff said smoothly, turning to a map on his clipboard, you are. He showed me a redrawn property map, one that conveniently included my land within HOA boundaries. They had literally redrawn the map to claim my property. I let out a slow, controlled breath. You need to leave. Now. Jeff's smile didn't budge, but I saw something flicker in his expression. Annoyance. Look, John, can I call you John? This doesn't have to be difficult. The HOA is offering you an opportunity to be part of something bigger. Your cabin will be put to good use, and in return, you'll be part of a thriving community. I took a step closer, my voice dead calm. Get office my property. The two men exchanged glances, but after a moment, they backed off, walking toward their SUV. As Jeff climbed into the driver's seat, he rolled down his window. Karen will be in touch soon. It's best if you cooperate. I watched them pull away, my fists clenched. They thought they could just claim my land, that they could pressure me into handing over my cabin. I had no idea what kind of battle I was about to step into. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going down without a fight. I thought that was the end of it. After kicking those two HOA goons off my property, I figured Karen Holloway and her board would realize their mistake and move on to torment someone else. But I underestimated just how ruthless these people were. A week later, I arrived at my cabin for the weekend and immediately noticed something was off. A brand new sign was planted near my driveway, its polished wooden surface gleaming in the sun. My stomach dropped as I read the bold engraved letters. Sierra Pines Community Guest House, future site. What the hell? I jumped out of my truck and stormed over to the sign, my hands balling into fists. They were marking my land as if they already owned it. I yanked the damn thing out of the ground and threw it onto the gravel. But as my anger simmered, I realized this was more than just an overstep. This was a deliberate escalation, and it wasn't the only one. Inside my mailbox was another official-looking envelope, this time stamped Final Notice in red. Dear Mr. Rivers, despite multiple attempts to contact you, we have not received your cooperation in transitioning your property into the Sierra Pines community. Please be advised that your cabin is currently not in compliance with HOA regulations and is subject to mandatory improvements. Failure to address these issues may result in fines, property assessments, and potential legal action. We urge you to contact us immediately to resolve this matter amicably. Sincerely, Karen Holloway, HOA President. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Fines, legal action. These people were acting like they had any say over my land that was never part of their damn HOA. I stormed inside and grabbed my property deed from the safe, flipping through the documents to confirm what I already knew. Nowhere in any record was there mention of an HOA agreement. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number listed at the bottom of the letter. It rang twice before a chipper, annoyingly familiar voice answered. Hello, this is Karen Holloway with the Sierra Pines Homeowners Association. How can I assist you today? You can start by explaining why the hell you put a sign on my property. There was a pause, then a fake little chuckle. Ah, Mr. Rivers, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Did you receive my letter? Oh, I received it. I also received your future site sign. You've got 5 minutes to send someone to remove it before I set it on fire. Karen let out a small, patronizing sigh. Now, there's no need to be aggressive. We're simply trying to integrate your property into the community in a way that benefits everyone. You have no legal claim over my land, I shot back. Your HOA doesn't apply to me. That's where you're mistaken, she said smoothly. You see, the Sierra Pines community has expanded, and as a result, our jurisdiction has been redrawn. According to the new zoning maps, your cabin now falls within our managed area. I nearly laughed. You can't just redraw maps and claim private property like you're playing Monopoly. The county recognizes our authority, she said way too confidently. If you refuse to comply, you may face mounting fines and legal action. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't just going to fight this. I was going to bury them. You want to fight, Karen? You've got one. I hung up. I grabbed my trail cameras and set them up around my property, covering the driveway, cabin entrance, and tree line. If these people wanted to mess with me, I'd catch them in the act. And something told me this was just the beginning. At this point, I knew ignoring them wasn't an option. The HOA wasn't just pushing paperwork. They were actively trying to steal my land. I needed to be ready for whatever was coming next. And they didn't waste time. The very next weekend, I drove up to my cabin and felt my stomach drop. Something was different. At first, I couldn't place it, but then it hit me. My property markers were gone. The wooden stakes that clearly outlined my private land boundaries had been ripped out. I stepped out of my truck, scanning the area. That's when I saw it. A brand new HOA sign was planted right at the entrance to my driveway. Welcome to the Sierra Pines Community Guest House. For inquiries, please contact HOA Management. I felt a surge of anger as I stormed over and ripped the sign out of the ground. These people weren't just harassing me, they were pretending my cabin already belonged to them. I took out my phone and snapped pictures of everything. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure to have proof. I immediately called Karen Holloway, the HOA president. She picked up after a few rings, her voice sickly sweet. Oh, John, I was hoping you'd call. How can I help? I didn't bother with pleasantries. What the hell do you think you're doing? Your people removed my property markers and put up a sign claiming my land as part of your HOA. Karen sighed dramatically. John, I understand this is a lot of change for you, but your cabin is in a prime location. We're just trying to integrate it into the community smoothly. Integrate? I barked. You have no right to my land. If any of your people step foot here again, I'll have them arrested for trespassing. She let out a mocking chuckle. Oh, John, let's not be rash. We wouldn't want any unnecessary legal troubles, would we? That set off every red flag in my head. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was a full-blown land grab. I hung up and immediately called my attorney. Enough was enough. But the HOA wasn't finished. 2 days later, I caught their workers trying to renovate my property. When I arrived at my cabin that evening, I saw 3 men in HOA branded shirts setting up wooden picnic tables in my front yard. A small crew was measuring my deck, as if they were about to start construction. I slammed my truck door so hard the men flinched. "Get the hell off my property!" I shouted, marching toward them. One of them, a smug-looking guy in a tool belt, gave me an easygoing smile. "Relax, buddy. HOA hired us to make some improvements to the guest house." I stepped in front of him, my fists clenched. "This isn't a damn guest house. This is my property. Now pack up your shit and leave before I call the cops." The workers hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. Then, as if on cue, a black SUV rolled up the driveway. The driver's door opened, and Karen Holloway herself stepped out, wearing her signature power suit and fake smile. "John," she said smoothly, "this hostility isn't necessary. The community is just making a few adjustments to help you transition into the HOA." I took a step toward her. "Let me be clear, I am not part of your HOA. I will never be part of your HOA. If I catch another one of your people on my land, I'll have them arrested for trespassing. Am I clear?" Karen's smile faltered. She crossed her arms, tapping her manicured fingers against her elbow. "You're being very difficult, John. I was hoping we could handle this the easy way." "Here's my answer," I growled. "Get office my property." She exhaled sharply, signaling to the workers to pack up. As they loaded their trucks, Karen turned back to me, lowering her voice. "You're making a mistake. This won't end well for you." She drove away, but I knew this fight was just beginning. The HOA had just crossed a line, and I was about to show them just how big of a mistake that was. I barely had time to breathe before the next attack came. After Karen and her crew left, I reinforced my property markers, reinstalled private property, no trespassing signs, and sent a formal cease and desist letter through my attorney. I made it loud and clear. My land was off limits. I figured that might slow them down. I was wrong. The next morning, I drove up to my cabin and nearly slammed on the brakes. Someone had removed my signs. Again. But that wasn't even the worst part. Standing there, right in the middle of my driveway, was a group of HOA board members and residents, at least a dozen people, chatting like they were at a damn block party. There were coolers, lawn chairs, even a portable grill. A tall man in a pastel golf shirt noticed me first, nudging Karen, who was standing by a table covered with HOA pamphlets. She turned, flashing me a smile like this was all perfectly normal. "Ah, John, welcome. We're just holding a community meet and greet. Figured this was the perfect location." I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "This is my property," I said, stepping out of my truck. Karen waved a dismissive hand. Yes, we're aware of your concerns, but we really need to think about the bigger picture. Your cabin is a wonderful asset. It's unfair to keep it all to yourself." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. A woman in oversized sunglasses chimed in. "Yes, John. A guest house would really benefit everyone. These people were delusional." I walked straight to Karen, my patience gone. "You and your circus have 5 minutes to get off my land before I start calling tow trucks and police." Karen's smile tightened. "John, don't be so dramatic. You really should consider embracing the community spirit." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording everything. "This is private property," I said loudly, panning the camera to capture the entire group. "None of you have permission to be here. If you don't leave immediately, you will be charged with trespassing." That got their attention. Some of the guests suddenly looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. A few even started gathering their things. Karen's expression darkened. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, signaling her people to pack up. But before she left, she leaned in and whispered, "You think a few cameras will stop us? We always get what we want." She turned and strolled back to her car, her heels clicking against my gravel driveway. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was war. And I was about to hit back hard. I thought I had seen the worst of the HOA's antics. I thought wrong. After they held their unauthorized community event on my land, I stepped up my defenses. I installed motion-activated cameras, added heavier-duty locks, and made sure that every inch of my property was marked as private. My attorney was already working on a formal lawsuit against the HOA, but legal battles take time, and I knew they weren't finished with me yet. Still, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. I was in town running errands when my phone buzzed. It was Tom, my neighbor, and his voice was sharp with urgency. "John, you need to get up here. Now." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "What happened?" "Your house. People are inside. They're using your damn house like it's a vacation rental." I didn't even answer. I just threw my truck into gear and sped toward the cabin. 20 minutes later, I skidded into my driveway and nearly lost it right then and there. There were 3 SUVs parked haphazardly near my porch. Lawn chairs were scattered across my front yard, and a family was roasting marshmallows over a fire pit I didn't own, and my front door was wide open. I slammed my truck door and stormed up the steps, my pulse pounding in my ears. Inside, I found a group of strangers lounging in my living room. A couple sat on my couch drinking wine. A man in swim trunks was walking out of my bathroom, drying his hair with one of my towels. The moment they saw me, they all froze. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded. A middle-aged woman in a sundress, who was holding a damn glass of champagne, frowned at me like I was the intruder. "Oh, are you the property manager?" she asked, completely unfazed. I blinked. "The what?" She gestured around. "The HOA told us this was a rental property. We booked it for the weekend through their office, paid a deposit, and everything." My blood went ice cold. Karen, that woman had actually rented out my home. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. "This is my house. You have exactly 60 seconds to get your things and get the hell out before I call the police." Their faces went pale. The man with the towel, who had just used my shower, was the first to move, grabbing his things in a hurry. The woman in the sundress still looked confused. "But we paid." "Not my problem," I snapped, already dialing 911. As the last of the guests were piling into their cars and peeling out of my driveway, a familiar black SUV pulled up. Of course, Karen stepped out, still dressed in her usual professional pantsuit and smug expression like she hadn't just committed grand theft property. "John," she purred, "let's not be rash." I held up my phone. "Save it. The cops are already on their way." Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, John, you're being so dramatic. This was just a little misunderstanding." I took a step forward, barely restraining myself. "You broke into my house, changed my locks, and rented it out like a goddamn Airbnb. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime." Karen tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Technically, your property is now part of the Sierra Pines community. We were simply facilitating a service." I let out a bitter laugh. "Facilitating? You committed breaking and entering, fraud, theft." For the first time, I saw a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for. Police sirens. Karen turned just as 2 squad cars pulled into my driveway, lights flashing. I crossed my arms, my voice deadly calm. "Let's see you talk your way out of this one." Karen's smug expression finally cracked when the police stepped out of their squad cars. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching as she adjusted her blazer, pasted on her usual fake smile, and walked toward the officers like she was hosting a town hall meeting. "Officers, what a surprise!" she chirped, clasping her hands together like she wasn't standing in the middle of an active crime scene. "I can explain this little misunderstanding." I cut her off, holding up my phone. "Save it, Karen. I have everything recorded." One of the officers turned to me. "Sir, can you explain the situation?" I wasted no time. "She broke into my house, changed my locks, and illegally rented it out without my consent. I have video proof of the trespassers admitting they booked the property through the HOA, and I have documents showing that my land is not part of their association." The officer's expression darkened. "You have keys to the property." I pulled out my keyring and walked up to the front door, unlocking it smoothly. The lock hadn't been changed. They had just forced their way inside. Karen tried to backpedal immediately. Now, John, there's no need to escalate this. I'm sure we can come to an understanding." The officer ignored her, turning to me. "Would you like to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." For the first time, Karen actually looked rattled. "Oh, come on, John, think about this. Dragging this into court. It'll be a nightmare for both of us." I stepped forward, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "No, Karen, it'll be a nightmare for you." She opened her mouth to respond, but one of the officers was already pulling out his handcuffs. "Ma'am, I need you to turn around." And just like that, the HOA queen was being placed under arrest. But I wasn't stupid. I knew she had lawyers and money, and she'd try to weasel her way out of this. So I did what I do best. I prepared for war. I spent the next few days turning my cabin into a fortress of proof. I copied all my surveillance footage onto multiple USB drives. I had everything: trespassing HOA board members, Karen's workers trying to renovate my deck, and even her people setting up a damn grill in my yard. I documented every piece of correspondence, letters, fake fines, their fraudulent attempts to claim my property. I gathered witness statements. My neighbor, Tom, had seen everything and was more than happy to testify against the HOA. I hired a forensic locksmith to confirm that my locks had been tampered with, proving they had no legal way of entering my home. But the real bombshell came from a whistleblower. A week after Karen's arrest, I received an anonymous email. It was from a former HOA board member, and the information they sent me: gold. Attached were HOA internal documents showing that Karen had been embezzling funds, not just from fraudulent rentals like mine, but from every homeowner in the community. She had been pocketing maintenance fees that never actually went to maintenance. This wasn't just a civil case anymore. This was a criminal case. And I was about to bring the whole damn HOA crashing down. The courtroom was packed. It wasn't just a civil case anymore. This had exploded into a full-blown legal spectacle. News had spread fast, and now half the damn town was watching. Some came because they hated the HOA. Others because they had also been victims of Karen's schemes. But the best part? Most of the HOA board members had abandoned her. When I walked in with my lawyer, I saw Karen sitting stiffly at the defendant's table, looking far less composed than usual. Gone was her smug confidence. She looked exhausted and furious, her usual crisp blazer wrinkled at the sleeves. Her lawyer sat beside her, flipping through a massive stack of documents, but I knew the truth. She was cornered, and she knew it. My lawyer started strong, presenting video footage of the HOA trespassing, the fake property signs, and the illegal rental agreements. The court watched as my security cameras caught HOA workers renovating my deck without permission. Then we hit them with the big one: the whistleblower documents. Karen's face turned ghost white as my lawyer laid out the embezzlement evidence. Thousands of dollars in community improvement fees, all funneled into Karen's personal accounts. Fake fines issued to homeowners for violations, never filed properly. Money collected for legal fees, paid directly to Karen's personal attorney. Her own lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. Then came the witnesses. My neighbor Tom took the stand and dismantled any hope Karen had left. He told the court everything: how she threatened homeowners, how she lied about my property being part of the HOA, and how she had rented my house out to strangers like it was some vacation lodge. By the time he stepped down, even the judge looked pissed. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it, claiming there were miscommunications and clerical errors, but the judge wasn't having it. Then it was my turn to speak. I looked directly at Karen as I said, "This wasn't about a community. This was about control and greed. You didn't care about homeowners. You cared about power." She wouldn't even look at me. After a brutally short deliberation, the judge delivered the final blow. Karen was personally liable for damages, meaning she had to pay me back every penny she stole from me. The entire HOA was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay back the homeowners she had scammed. And the best part? Karen was facing felony fraud charges. As she was escorted out of the courtroom, she finally looked at me. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. This time, she was the one who had lost everything. I stood on my porch, taking in the view of my land, undisputed, untouched, and finally free. The battle was over. Karen was done. After the trial, she was forced to sell her house to cover legal costs. Rumor had it she tried moving out of state, but with a felony fraud charge hanging over her, she wasn't going far. As for the HOA, completely dissolved. Every member who had blindly followed Karen's lead now had to deal with the fallout. Many of them were furious when they realized she had stolen their money, and some even filed lawsuits against her. And me. I walked away with every bit of my property intact, plus a massive financial settlement. Every fake fine, every cent they tried to steal from me, I got it all back with interest. With the HOA gone, Sierra Pines actually became a better place. Homeowners who once lived in fear of Karen's tyranny started making their own choices. People repainted their houses however they wanted. Some even threw celebration parties for the HOA's downfall. Tom, my ever-loyal neighbor, became a local hero for testifying in court. We had a drink on my porch the night after the verdict, watching the sunset. "So," he said, tipping his beer toward my land, "what's next for the great John Rivers?" I smirked. Hopefully, some damn peace and quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I finally got it. I had won.